Welcome to NTD Good Morning.
Here are today's top stories. The White House announcing 4 new trade deals with Latin American countries and signing an order to expand opportunities for young people transitioning out of foster care.
Obamacare premiums are about to rise as COVID-era tax subsidies are set to expire in 2 months. Lawmakers are weighing how to address the issue, and President Trump proposes Trumpcare.
A group of TSA agents at Houston's George Bush Intercontinental Airport were awarded $10,000 for going above and beyond while working without pay during the shutdown.
And a major mob-tied sports betting bust in New Jersey. Prosecutors charged 14 people and say the ring moved millions through offshore sites.
Meanwhile, Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin successfully launches twin NASA spacecraft on a mission to Mars. What this could mean for future manned missions to the Red Planet.
And what defines success for you? Ahead, we'll speak with the author of a new book who says our definition may be what's limiting us.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephania Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Today's Friday, November 14th, and in today's top news, the White House announcing 4 new trade deals with Argentina, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Ecuador. The deals would lift reciprocal tariffs on some products the U.S. relies on.
That's right. And President Trump and First Lady Melania signed an executive order to create new educational and employment opportunities for youth transitioning out of foster care. NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu brings us more.
The White House is announcing 4 new framework trade deals with Latin American countries. This is coming as President Trump is planning to ramp up domestic travel ahead of the 2026 midterms, where he plans to talk with voters about affordability. So according to a senior administration official, products now coming from Argentina, El Salvador, and Guatemala will be tariffed at 10%, while products coming from Ecuador will be tariffed at 15%. The official adds, though, that these deals will include tariff relief on products not grown domestically in the U.S., such as coffee, cocoa, and bananas. And meanwhile, President Trump and First Lady Melania signed an executive order establishing the Fostering the Future program as part of the Be Best initiative that the First Lady Melania established during President Trump's first term in 2018. Take a look.
Predict this small spark today will ignite a profound and lasting nationwide movement. Our united resolve will foster a thriving future filled with compassion and innovation.
The First Lady headlining an executive order signing aimed at expanding opportunities for education, career development, and housing for youth transitioning out of the foster care system.
Under the Trump administration, we believe that every American child deserves a safe and loving home, and we're determined to support the amazing families who help make that happen. And we have some of those families in the room today, and I just want to thank you all for being in the White House. There is no place like this, and we want to thank you very much for being here.
The order directs HHS to modernize data and deploy AI for better caregiver matching while reallocating unused federal funds into trade school scholarships and demanding states include faith-based providers or risk losing funding.
Well, you must know what your name is. My name is Donald. The Bible tells us that one of the measures of any society is how it cares for vulnerable children and orphans.
Meanwhile, the BBC apologizes to President Trump for airing a documentary right before the 2024 presidential election that doctors his speech, making it appear that he incited violence. The BBC calls the edit unintentional, rejects compensation demands, and denies any basis for defamation. This comes as The Telegraph exposes another misleading BBC edit of the same speech on Newsnight in 2022, with President Trump saying he has to sue because the BBC defrauded the public.
Well, I think I have an obligation to do it because you can't allow people to do that. They actually changed my January 6th speech, which was a beautiful speech, which was a very calming speech, and they made it sound radical.
Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Harmeet Dillon, is reacting to a BBC Media Action post that shows that the U.S. Agency for International Development is its #2 donor. So she accuses the network of defaming the president in exchange for its funding.
Thank you, Mari, for that report. And millions of Americans are facing higher health insurance costs. In 2 months, COVID-era tax subsidies for Obamacare are set to expire.
Lawmakers are weighing how to address these higher premiums. President Trump is proposing Trumpcare. NTD's Melina Weisskopf brings us more.
With a freshly reopened government, lawmakers have 2 months to find a path forward on health care. President Trump says he's committed to addressing the issue.
We want a healthcare system where we pay the money to the people instead of the insurance companies. And I tell you, we're going to be working on that very hard over the next short period of time.
COVID-era tax subsidies, which made Obamacare more affordable, will expire on January 1st.
I expect Republicans to be at the table in the next few weeks. I expect the White House to be at the table. And if they do choose not to come to the table, they can own the disastrous premium increases that will continue to rise.
Senators are expected to vote on an Obamacare extension in December. Bipartisan negotiations are underway.
We have senators, both Democrat and Republican, who are eager to get to work to address that crisis in a bipartisan way. These senators are not interested in political games. They're interested in finding real ways to address health care costs for American families.
While talks look more promising in the Senate, the House shows a stark contrast between the parties.
I'm not going to guarantee a vote on ACA unreformed COVID-era subsidies that is just a boondoggle to insurance companies and robs the taxpayer. We got a lot of work to do on that.
We'll introduce legislation to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for 3 years to make sure that tens of millions of Americans don't experience dramatically increased premiums, copays, and deductibles.
While some moderate Republicans are open to the extensions, many want to reform the program or replace Obamacare altogether.
The health care system broke under Obamacare. And as President Trump said, well, I'm not going to repeat his exact words for it, but it's not ideal. And we're going to have to work together to get this fixed because
President Trump is floating an idea he called Trumpcare in a Fox News interview earlier this week. It would be health accounts for people to pay for medical issues.
Everybody's going to be happy. They're going to feel like entrepreneurs. They're actually able to go out and negotiate their own health insurance. And they can use it only for that reason. That's the beauty, only for that purpose. And if we did that, that would be so exciting. Call it Trumpcare, call it whatever you want to call it. But
Republicans have not yet unveiled concrete legislation. CMS Administrator Mehmet Oz said, "We have lots of great ideas, but I don't want to show our cards." Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
From major takedowns to rewarding loyal employees, it was an eventful week for the Department of Homeland Security. NTD's Daniel Monahan has a closer look, including a sting that nabbed more than 150 alleged sex offenders.
Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem awarded checks to 24 TSA agents at Houston's George Bush Intercontinental Airport.
What I'm so proud of, though, today, and what I'm here talking about today, is the outstanding patriotism and service of our TSA officers and officials that stepped up every single day.
Noem says the payments recognize employees who went above and beyond while working without pay during the shutdown.
For stepping up, taking on extra shifts, for showing up each and every day, for serving the American people.
Secretary Noem said the department will continue awarding bonuses to TSA employees who showed exemplary performance. From the friendly skies to the criminal underworld, Noem also praised DHS law enforcement officers for what she called heroic arrests during the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. Those arrested included Victor Manuel Mendoza Garcia, an illegal immigrant from Mexico, convicted of 3 counts of aggravated kidnapping and ransom in Cook County, Illinois, and William Giovanni Lopez Fuentes, an illegal immigrant from Guatemala, convicted of assault of a child in Sunbury, Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, in a major bust, DHS announced the arrest of more than 150 sex offenders who are illegal immigrants. Noem commented on the operation during an interview on Fox News.
These individuals should have never been in our country to begin with. The fact that they were sexual deviants and perverts, and now we've gotten them off of our streets, it's remarkable, and we need to do more of it.
The operation targeted child predators, rapists, and violent offenders with convictions ranging from sexual assault of minors and child exploitation to rape and attempted homicide. In total, more than 230 criminal illegal immigrants were arrested. Noem didn't hide her feelings about those crimes.
This operation was called Operation Criminal Return. I call it Operation Dirtbag because these individuals were sex offenders, but not just sex offenders, they targeted children.
And DHS also uncovered alleged crimes at the ballot box. The department released new voting records tied to Jose Ceballos Armendariz, a 54-year-old Mexican immigrant accused of voting illegally in multiple Kansas elections. He faces felony charges including 3 counts of voting without being qualified and 3 counts of election perjury. Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin says President Trump and Secretary Noem granted states access to the Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements program, known as SAVE, to help confirm voter eligibility. McLaughlin says SAVE is a critical tool for state and local governments to safeguard election integrity. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James asked a South Carolina judge to disqualify the interim U.S. attorney who brought the criminal cases against them. The judge appeared to have doubts about the attorney's appointment. Judge Cameron Curry, who's based in South Carolina, presided over the proceeding held in Virginia to avoid any conflicts for the Virginia judges. Curry expressed deep skepticism over whether the Justice Department's recently appointed prosecutor, Lindsay Halligan, is eligible to take on that role. James and Comey argue Halligan was appointed after a previous U.S. attorney in the district had used up the temporary 120-day period allowed, and that Attorney General Pam Bondi does not have the authority to make back-to-back appointments. The Justice Department argues that even if Halligan is improperly serving in the role, the indictments should not be thrown out because they don't hinge on her holding the office. While it's unclear how the judge will ultimately rule, she is expected to decide before Thanksgiving. A ruling against the government could derail both indictments.
And up ahead, tensions between Turkey and Israel are escalating over the future of Gaza.
We'll be joined live in studio by the president of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs to unpack the situation.
And the U.S. Coast Guard is monitoring a Russian military vessel spotted near Hawaii. What officials are saying about this sighting. We'll be back with that and more.
Meanwhile, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has announced a new military operation against narco-terrorists. All we know so far. All that. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. A fast-moving wildfire in a California county near the Nevada border damaged 15 structures yesterday and forced people to evacuate.
It also closed part of a highway as firefighters battled the flames in strong winds.
The California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection said the Pac fire in Mono County grew to about 5.3 square miles last night and was burning without any containment. The rural county is located between the Sierra Nevada and the Nevada state line.
Fire started just before 12:30 p.m. and then it spread more than 1,000 acres in less than 90 minutes. It was whipped up by gusts as strong as 50 miles per hour, and that temporarily grounded emergency aircraft.
Part of Highway 395 was temporarily closed. It was unclear whether any homes had been destroyed.
And by evening, the fire had slowed down, fortunately, because of rain in the area. The cause of the fire still under investigation. And New Jersey authorities have charged 14 people in what prosecutors call a mob-connected illegal sports betting ring. State officials say the operation moved millions of dollars over several years and even used collegiate athletes as bookies. Attorney General Matthew Platkin announced the arrests, which include Joseph Little Joe Perna, identified as a soldier in the Lucchese crime family, accused of financing the ring. His son, Joseph R. Perna, is charged with running day-to-day operations. Several other relatives, including Perna's wife and ex-wife, are also among those indicted. Investigators say the group used offshore gambling websites and operated out of Essex and Bergen counties. They allegedly handled roughly $2 million in transactions between 2022 and 2024. And a new provision in the federal spending bill signed by President Trump could dramatically reshape the fast-growing market for hemp-derived THC products. The measure bars any item containing more than 0.4 milligrams of THC per container. that effectively outlaws many popular gummies, drinks, vapes, and topical products now sold nationwide. The hemp industry warns the limit could wipe out 95% of the market, threatening what it says is more than 300,000 jobs. An effort by Senator Rand Paul to remove the language was rejected in the Senate. Farmers and small business owners say the change could force them to shut down. Supporters, including Senator Mitch McConnell and dozens of state attorneys general, argue the loophole created by the 2018 Farm Bill has enabled unregulated, intoxicating products to proliferate.
The parents of at least 2 babies who got sick in a botulism outbreak are suing the makers of Byheart baby formula. The formula is at the center of a nationwide recall. A couple from Flagstaff, Arizona, said their 4-month-old daughter had to be flown to a children's hospital 2 hours away and treated for several weeks this summer. Another couple from Richmond, Kentucky, said their 4-month-old daughter was rushed to a hospital as her symptoms of the rare and deadly and potentially deadly disease got worse. The Centers for Disease Control has connected the contaminated formula to at least 15 cases in infants across 12 states. Plaintiffs are seeking payment for medical costs, emotional distress, and additional harm. Byheart officials did not respond to questions about the new lawsuits, but said they would address any legal claims in due course.
The Justice Department has filed a lawsuit against the state of California over its Proposition 50 initiative to create new congressional districts. NTD's Arlene Richards brings us more.
After California voters overwhelmingly approved Proposition 50, a constitutional amendment that changes the congressional boundaries to favor Democrats, the Justice Department filed a lawsuit Thursday to block it. Prop 50 was Governor Gavin Newsom's response to a similar Republican-led effort in Texas, where Republican-led lawmakers voted to redraw its districts with the potential of picking up 5 seats. The lawsuit, filed in a California federal court, accuses California of racial gerrymandering in violation of the Constitution. It states, quote, California's congressional redistricting map, Proposition 50, is racially gerrymandered in violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. Attorney General Pam Bondi said in a statement to the Associated Press, quote, California's redistricting scheme is a brazen power grab that tramples on civil rights and mocks the democratic process. With the lines redrawn, Democrats in California have a shot at winning 5 seats now held by Republicans in next year's midterm elections. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
The Department of the Interior has revoked Biden-era limits on oil drilling in Alaska. Secretary of the Interior Doug Burgum says the action follows President Trump's direction to unlock Alaska's energy potential, create jobs for North Slope communities, and strengthen American energy security. Biden's 2024 rule prohibited oil and gas leasing on more than 10 million acres of the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska. It also limited development on more than 2 million additional acres. According to the department, the change is meant to align reserve management with rules established in 1977. An Alaska Native group, Voice of the Arctic Inupiat, said in a statement that it supported the rollback. The group said drilling infrastructure contributes meaningfully to the region's tax revenue and supports services like health care and education.
And a new report finds the states of New York and New Jersey have lost billions of dollars in potential revenue because of residents moving to lower tax states, such as Florida and Texas. The report by Unleash Prosperity found New York's losses were the largest. Joining us now to discuss this 10-year trend is Unleash Prosperity's Executive Director, Tim Doscher. Tim, thanks for joining us this morning. The data in your report shows a 10-year trend. What's behind the numbers of the tax revenue flight?
Well, look, that is an incredible introduction there, because if you think about it, this is one of the biggest stories domestically in America that hardly anybody is talking about. You talk about this redrawing of congressional districts in the last segment. Well, a lot of that's happening because we are seeing that people are fleeing one area and going to another. And then you have states like California who have lost 1.6 million people over the last 10 years. And that's a little bit lag data. So that number is actually higher in today's standards. And they're trying to make up for it. They're trying to restructure, rejigger to keep their power. This is a huge deal because not only are people leaving, but like you said, The money is leaving for these blue states, New York, California, Connecticut, New Jersey, Illinois, all these blue states. They have such expensive governments that cost money to run, and they're losing that tax base because they jack those tax rates up so high. People say, you know what, I've had enough. I'm going to take me, my family, and my business with me.
It's an interesting point, especially Trump calling for an expedited census because of the point that you're making, saying that, you know, the maps don't really reflect the populations because of such a dramatic shift in populations. But isn't the conventional thinking that more people will always arrive, at least to the New York City area, the LA area, to compensate for those leaving?
Well, remember, this is a net number. So people are always, of course, they're moving in. Of course, people are going to move into New Jersey, New York, for sure. It's the Big Apple. There's always going to be a need and a desire to do that. But this on net, meaning that even in spite of people moving in, you have all the more people moving out. And that is a direct response. And by the way, it's not just people. It's their businesses. Like you see that number, as we say, 2/3 of $1 trillion between New York and New Jersey combined. Look, that's because people are taking not just their incomes, but they're taking their business with them to states like Florida, South Carolina, Texas, all the places in the South where they're not going to be taxed so high. So, while it is true that people are moving in, who's moving in? Are they business owners? Are they people that are going to take the city forward and continue to be the innovative cultural hub of the entire world? Or is that going to relocate into the South in a Texas or in a Florida? I think that's going to be the latter, not the former.
Very interesting. And then to stay with that point and stay right here in the Big Apple and New Jersey in the metro area, what does the election of Mamdani and Mikey Sherrill mean for the future of this trend and this particular geo?
Well, how do you get Mamdani? I think you get Mamdani because you've driven out all of the people that would have potentially put another candidate over the finish line. You know, when you have socialism, you attract socialists. I was just in Finland 2 weeks ago, and we were sitting down at a restaurant, and the server comes up to our table and says, "Wow, you're from America, the New York election, this is incredible." I go, "What do you care about a mayoral election?" And he said something very important. He said, "Well, he's a socialist. I'm a socialist. We have to unite because what happens in New York is going to happen around the world." This is an extremely telling sign that not just Democrats, blue dog Democrats, traditional Democrats are populating the city anymore, but it's far leftists that are moving in, driving out all the other voters. And so I do think the election of Mamdani is very, very signifying of where things are standing politically in New York, and it's not good.
So your 10-year trend shows one aspect of this, that people are relocating, and it takes a lot of effort, right, to pick up and move. If you think about Giuliani, Chris Christie, even Vermont had elected a Republican governor. So the question to you is, do you expect this trend of blue state population flight to continue, or does it eventually hit like a rock bottom and then come the other way, as we've seen in the past?
Well, it just depends on who the earners are. It depends on who the people and the families who get tired of, let's think about critical race theory in school. Let's think about DEI programs. Let's think about all the economic factors that cause people to say, look, I've had enough. Because a lot of these states, they continue to go full bore down the left's pathway to devastation, not to prosperity. So look, of course things can be turned around. A little goes a long way. Again, like we said, New York is the hub of the entire world. New Jersey is in that same hub. The Northeast was once a huge manufacturing, great stronghold. But when you keep putting not just high taxes and high regulations, but anti-energy provisions that cause you to pay 2-3 times more than you're paying in the South, or when you put on these DEI and critical race theory programs at school, look, this is people have had enough, and so they finally say, I'm going where the grass is greener, and it actually is warmer in the winter.
And you bring up a really interesting point, and as we finish up, just real quick, 30 seconds. You mentioned energy. How does that one issue factor into this trend?
Well, look, there's this program, and we need more than 30 seconds. It's called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI. And a lot of the states in the Northeast are a part of this. And it says we're going to reach a net of a certain amount of emissions of carbon emissions. And that really holds stuff because that limits coal, that limits nuclear, that limits all the different things and forces them to do very expensive energy like nuclear, like wind and solar. When again, you could be in a state next door who isn't a part of RGGI and they are producing coal and using that stuff. It's completely senseless, but what it does do is it makes things 2 to 3 times more expensive for businesses and for families to heat their house.
Well, you bring up an alarming trend. We'll be keeping a close eye on it, of course, and we appreciate you joining us this morning. Tim Dosher, good to see you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you for covering this. It's an important story.
Certainly is, and Tim makes a great point about this bleeding out of ideologies across the world and how that can all reinforce each other. But in our next news, 2 Republican senators held a congressional field hearing in Pacific Palisades, California, listening to the victims of the January 7th wildfire.
Yeah, the hearing, which focused on government response and insurance challenges, it comes nearly 10 months after the fire devastated the community. NTD's Kristi Noem brings us more from California.
On Thursday, Senators Rick Scott and Ron Johnson led a field hearing in California on the aftermath of the Palisades fire. The January 7th blaze caused billions in property damage and claimed 12 lives.
I believe the Palisades fire was more than just a horrific tragedy. It was an unacceptable failure of government to protect the lives and property of its citizens. And we all know that this fire hurt our seniors more than anyone else.
Survivors and local leaders say their concerns have not yet been fully addressed.
On the day of the Pacific Palisades fire, reservoirs were empty. Fire hydrants went dry, and innocent people, including many vulnerable seniors, perished, while thousands more lost their homes, businesses, and everything they owned.
Lawmakers heard from residents and business owners to examine gaps in government response and preparedness. One resident said the fire department told him why they couldn't save his home.
John, we couldn't have saved your house or the block or the area. Our hydrants weren't working, and each truck holds 500 gallons of water. He said 500 gallons of water doesn't go very far.
He said guards and residents were using water from swimming pools, doing everything they could to put out sparks as the fire spread. Another resident said she never received alerts to evacuate. She stayed behind making calls through the night to help seniors and others at risk.
Seniors with mobility issues, those dependent on oxygen, residents with dementia who needed assistance. They all lost precious hours because of inadequate warnings.
Palisades resident Bruce Schwartz said State Farm dropped his insurance in October 2024. Just 76 days later, 17 of the 25 homes in his community burned down.
We were so severely underinsured that rebuilding required an affirmative vote of 75% of our homeowners.
He said the vote failed because some homeowners whose property survived refused to fund rebuilding for those who lost everything.
So now we have no home and no right even to rebuild one. To make matters worse, some of my neighbors will be forced to surrender their home to their lenders.
Other residents were dropped by their insurance after the fire.
Lots of residents found out after the fire that their policies had been dropped, and I was one of them.
Afterwards?
After the fire.
While nothing can undo the damage done by the Pacific Palisades fire, I am committed to advocating for the victims, their families, and this community to get answers and make sure this never happens anywhere in our great country ever again.
On Thursday, Los Angeles County announced they've launched an investigation into State Farm's handling of the Palisades and Eaton fire claims, focusing on potential violations of California's unfair competition law. This comes after complaints of delays, underpayments, and denied claims. Kristi Noem, NTD News.
And State Farm responded to the investigation by Los Angeles County in a statement to media.
The company said it's there to help its customers recover and that it empathizes with those who are rebuilding their lives, adding, quote, "Our focus continues to be on supporting our customers in their recovery from the largest fire event we have ever experienced."
Still to come, the U.S. Coast Guard is monitoring a Russian military vessel spotted near Hawaii. What officials are saying about the sighting and more after this.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. Tensions between Turkey and Israel have been escalating. Turkey has issued arrest warrants against 37 Israeli officials, including the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, over claims of genocide.
Israel has countered by insisting Turkey shall have no role to play in the multinational security force in Gaza that's supposed to assume control from Hamas and the Israel Defense Force, as agreed to as part of Trump's peace plan.
Joining us now live to discuss is Dr. Dan Diker. He's president of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Dr. Diker, thank you so much for joining us here in studio.
Very good morning to you in New York.
Yeah, thank you. Just want to jump right in and get your initial understandings of this tension now between Israel and Turkey playing out.
Much of what the West doesn't know is that Turkey is is breaking away to become the new neo-Ottoman Islamic empire in the Middle East. And they see the main obstacle to that goal is the state of Israel. They have been a frenemy, and now they're really an adversary of Israel, and they are mobilizing enormous pressure on the American administration, President Trump, in order to restrain Israel from defeating Hamas, which is a direct threat to the United States' interest in the Middle East, America first, and they are a strategic threat to Israel. And now what they've done, as you've reported here this morning, is to engage in a type of Soviet, Chinese regime, Iranian regime political warfare to try to isolate Israel by accusing it of genocide and filing papers with international courts. This is intolerable. The United States has got to recognize and act. The Turkish regime is not a friend of the United States, notwithstanding President Trump's embrace for political reasons of Erdogan. And I think, as they say in Latin, caveat emptor, may the buyer beware when it comes to Erdogan's neo-Ottoman vision, aspirations to control the Middle East and replace the Iranian regime as the major power in the region.
So what caused that shift, or was it always that way? Because Turkey was pivotal in the recent ceasefire agreement.
Absolutely. Turkey, first of all, we know is the second most powerful nation in NATO. So on the one hand, here it has this, very profound military security relationship with Western powers, and on the other hand, it, together with Qatar and some of the other Arab countries, were instrumental in signing on to the Trump 20-point plan, the first stage of which return the living hostages that Hamas had kept in their death tunnels for the past 2 years. They did play an important role there, but they understood the game. And they're playing out the game right now by calling these horrific, propagandistic terms and accusations against Israel. And that puts pressure on President Trump and the American administration, stresses the relationship, because the president knows that for now, in order to make nominally the Trump plan, the second stage of the Trump plan, which is to demilitarize Gaza, which is to force Hamas to give up its arms, which is to bring an international stabilization force, that Turkey wants to continue playing a role, has offered to put 2,000 men armed in Gaza, which would be a strategic threat to the state of Israel, and Israel will not allow that to happen. Turkey knows that creates a very problematic divide and creates tension between Israel and its greatest ally, the United States. They're playing the long game here.
Yeah, it really is fascinating how you're breaking this down, and how just because multiple entities are opposed to Israel, that they're also jockeying against each other behind the scenes. So I want to get your view on how this extremism, Islamic extremism directed against Israel gets funded, and is that now, in your view, changing from one set of players to potentially another set of players?
Absolutely. Islamic extremism today which must be emphasized and underscored in the United States every single day, is being sourced by Qatar and sourced in Turkey. Turkey, we know, is a headquarters for Hamas leadership. They plan terror attacks out of Istanbul. The same thing in Qatar. Qatar has spent tens of billions of dollars in the United States buying up organizations and investing billions in the American stock markets, controlling university courses and even departments with billions and billions of dollars. The ISGAP organization has done great research on this out of the United States. This is what is called soft power political warfare, and the Qataris, even though the administration, the Qataris have called one another allies. These, I mean, again, may the buyer beware. This is an Islamic power. This is Hamas in other clothing. And this is exactly what Israel has recognized and has tried to warn. And it's very, very important to understand that Qatar has been penetrating as a Muslim Brotherhood country for several decades. And they work quietly, but this is a nefarious country that is backing Hamas and backing other Muslim Brotherhood actors in Syria and in Egypt. And we've got to recognize that if the President of the United States, who has done tremendous work in the region, and his 20-point plan theoretically should definitely be celebrated, and he's done great things for his great ally, the State of Israel, that the Qataris are not friends of the United States or the West. They have an Islamic goal, and they are pursuing that goal quietly through terror financing, and that will ultimately destabilize the Middle East and achieve exactly the opposite of what the president wants to achieve, which is a secure, safe, and prosperous Middle East with Israel and Saudi Arabia leading the way together with the United States.
In our last minute, I just want to understand then who should rule Gaza, or what peace force? Indonesia looks like they want to step up. They're the largest Muslim country. Should the UN have a role with some of the things that have happened questionably with UNRWA? Who should be in this peace force if Turkey should not be?
Excellent question. The truth is that there is no Arab country, not the Saudis, and no other, not the Indonesians, that are prepared to confront Hamas militarily. And if you look at the little writing under the news reports today, as we're speaking today, that the Indonesians are prepared to offer 20,000 men. Those are for peacekeeping operations, for infrastructure building, for stabilization. No one's talking about confronting Hamas with arms and to disarm them by force, to demilitarize by force. There's only one force that can do that: the Israel Defense Forces. They've done it. They can do it. They must do it. It's on their border. How we should rebuild Gaza. The Middle East is structured by family, clans, and tribes. In Gaza, there are hundreds of families who want to defend themselves against the Hamas. Unfortunately, in major American media, we don't see the huge outcry of Gazans that are saying, Hamas, you've ruined our lives. They're afraid for their lives to say that on television. It's not a democracy, it's a theocracy. But the truth is, the way Gaza should emerge is through local councils, local districts, having families, clans, and tribes defend themselves against this bloody extremist regime called Hamas. That's the outcome. The Western notion of a Westphalian nation state, like the United States and like Europe.
Jefferson democracy, maybe not happening.
Jefferson and Jacksonian democracy do not work in the Middle East. It is a different culture. I think the president recognized that when he went and spoke in Saudi, and good for him. That's the way Gaza and the West Bank, the Palestinian areas of the West Bank, Judea and Samaria as it's known in Israel, those areas under Palestinian rule, the Palestinian Authority has to be kicked out, and that's what most of the local population is saying. And the local families in all of the major areas under Palestinian Authority control should be turned over to local councils based on those families and clans that are the notables in those areas. That's just like the Arab Emirates. The United Arab Emirates creates a similar model that can be copied and pasted into other areas across the Middle East.
Otherwise, as you say, buyer beware. Dr. Dan Diker, thank you so much for coming in, sharing your insights. Clearly a hotbed, and we're all watching very closely as this next phase of Trump's 20-point plan hopefully goes into play successfully. Thank you.
Thank you.
The BBC has apologized to President Trump over a documentary that selectively edited a clip of his January 6, 2021 speech. The edit spliced together parts of the speech that were nearly 1 hour apart, giving the impression that Trump had called for violence.
The documentary was aired in the run-up to the 2024 election, while the BBC has now retracted the documentary and it apologized to Trump's legal team. Trump's legal team is calling for compensation, which the BBC are refusing to pay. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson brings us more on the story from London.
The British Broadcasting Corporation, or BBC, sent a personal apology to President Trump on Thursday, but said they believe there is no legal basis for Trump to sue the public broadcaster over a documentary Trump's lawyers called defamatory. The BBC edit created the false impression that Trump had called for violence ahead of the January 6th Capitol breach. Speaking to the BBC, British Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy said it is right the BBC apologised.
I am confident that they've already started the work to get not just the right processes in place to make sure this doesn't happen again and get consistency across the board, but also to get the right mix of experience at the top of the organisation to make sure that those high journalistic standards are well understood at the top of the organisation and are upheld.
Last Sunday, Trump's lawyers threatened to sue the BBC for damages of up to $1 billion unless it withdrew the documentary, apologised to the president, and compensated him for financial and reputational harm. The BBC said the splicing of the speech was a, quote, error of judgment. It has withdrawn the documentary and apologised, but is refusing to pay compensation, and is now waiting for Trump's response to their apology. The BBC's Panorama news programme ran a documentary where they spliced together two parts of Trump's speech on January 6, 2021. It aired just before the US presidential election in 2024. The edit changed the meaning of the speech, creating the impression Trump had explicitly called for violence.
They played the following clip.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell.
But here is what Trump really said.
Right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Trump said, fight like hell, 54 minutes later in a separate part of his speech. On Thursday, the Telegraph newspaper reported the BBC also doctored the same speech in a similar way in 2022, more than 2 years before the Panorama edit aired. Trump's legal team said this shows a pattern of defamation against Trump. Responding to the fresh claims, a BBC spokesperson said, the BBC holds itself to the highest editorial standards and is now looking at the matter. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on Thursday said the BBC's edits are a clear example of fake news.
The president has made it very clear that this is a leftist propaganda machine that is unfortunately subsidized by British taxpayers, and he thinks that's extremely unfortunate for the great people of the United Kingdom and Great Britain.
The BBC has been thrown into its biggest crisis in decades amid allegations of bias, including on the edit of Trump's speech. The claims came to light because of a leaked report by a BBC standards official. 2 senior executives have since resigned. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, UK.
And the Coast Guard is keeping close watch on a Russian ship spotted near Hawaii. Here's what we know about this development.
The U.S. Coast Guard is monitoring a Russian military vessel detected near Hawaii in late October. Officials say the vessel was first spotted about 15 nautical miles south of the island of Oahu. Officials say both aircraft and a Coast Guard vessel were sent to assess the situation. Authorities identified the vessel as a Russian intelligence gathering ship. The Coast Guard says international law permits foreign military vessels to transit and operate outside other nations' territorial seas, but it says crews continue to observe the vessel to provide security for U.S. vessels in the area. Coast Guard leaders say monitoring maritime activity in the region is routine. Meanwhile, in Kyiv, emergency crews responded after Ukrainian officials said a large-scale Russian attack struck multiple districts of the capital earlier today. The city's mayor said at least 11 people were injured. As the war continues, European leaders are urging Ukraine to continue cracking down on corruption in the wake of a major scandal. The European Commission spokesperson said fighting against corruption is key for a country to join the European Union. The scandal centers on alleged embezzlement and kickbacks involving Ukraine's state-owned nuclear energy company. But European officials offered assurances that aid will continue to flow as Kyiv strains to hold back Russia's invasion.
The Chinese Communist Party gives the Venezuelan regime an economic lifeline as the Trump administration ramps up pressure on the foreign terrorist organization that it says is led by Nicolas Maduro.
Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on the story.
The Chinese Communist Party has announced a zero-tariff agreement with the Venezuelan regime on over 400 categories of products. The move throws an economic lifeline to the Venezuelan regime, which will allow them to buy Chinese products at discounted prices and would allow the Chinese Communist Party greater control over the South American country's economy.
Venezuela right now is a safe haven where Hezbollah, Hamas, the drug cartels, the Colombian guerrilla operate freely, and they are part of this liaison with the regime.
The CCP has lent over $60 billion to the Venezuelan regime over the past 2 decades. It has also endowed the Venezuelan National Guard with equipment to repress its citizenry, and it has built a ground satellite station in Venezuela, allowing the Chinese Communist Party a foothold in the Western Hemisphere.
It's been America first, peace through strength, common sense, revive the warrior ethos, rebuild the military, reestablish deterrence. We're going to defend the homeland. We're going to deter China. We're going to make sure our allies do their part in burden sharing, and we're going to revive the defense industrial base.
The Trump administration has zeroed in on the links in between the Venezuelan regime and the Chinese Communist Party and directed the Department of War to counter the malign influence stemming from foreign terrorist organizations operating from Venezuela and by the Venezuelan regime.
Now, imperialism is inventing an even more bizarre narrative. Since they cannot say that Maduro has weapons of mass destruction, since they cannot say that we have hidden biological or chemical weapons, they invent a bizarre narrative.
My advice to foreign terrorist organizations, do not get in a boat. I mean, if you're trafficking drugs to poison the American people, and we know you're from a designated terrorist organization, you're a foreign terrorist and a trafficker, we will find you and we will kill you.
The Venezuelan opposition leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado, who is in hiding in Venezuela, has thanked the Trump administration for their support.
Finally, a leadership that is addressing this tragic situation in Venezuela that has been evolving for 26 years, as it should. We have been asked that this criminal structure be addressed using law enforcement.
This week, the USS Gerald S. Ford, the largest and most advanced aircraft carrier in the world, enters Southern Command's area of operation to support operations against foreign terrorist organizations in the region. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And on November 13th, 2015, 10 years ago, France faced its deadliest terrorist attack. In Paris yesterday, families, survivors, and officials gathered across the city to honor the 132 victims.
The ceremonies revived memories of a night that reshaped the country. NTD International correspondent David Vivez reports from Paris.
People behind me are lining up to attend a major commemoration at the City Hall. Families and relatives have been invited to the opening of a square dedicated to the memory of those who died. 132 people were killed in the attacks, making it the deadliest terrorist attacks ever to occur in the country.
The terrorists found people much braver than themselves. Paris stood firm. You stood firm. France stood firm.
La France a tenu.
This memorial garden will be a place where all the victims who lost their lives on November 13th will be identified. But it will also be a place where survivors can gather, a place for both walking and reflection. It will be a place where life is reborn each spring.
9 ISIS gunmen and suicide bombers struck within minutes of one another at several locations in the deadliest violence to strike France since World War II. They targeted fans at the Stade de France stadium and café-goers and ending with a bloodbath in the Bataclan. More than 130 people were killed and over 140 were wounded. A decade later, the weight of that night remains deeply personal for many who call Paris home. Crowds gathered across the city, including at Republic Plaza, where Parisians were invited to lit candles, flowers, and handwritten notes throughout the week. Many French see these attacks as an assault on their way of life.
It's a way to pay tribute by going to the theater tonight. It's a way to keep living and thinking about all those people who, because they went to a show, because they went to see something on a terrace, left this world.
It's a wound that is still open. For the last 10 years, we've been saying there was a before and an after, but what comes after? Have actions been taken to ensure it doesn't happen again? I'm not sure. The threat is still there.
As night fell, the Eiffel Tower lit up in blue, white and red, the colors of the French flag. Church bells rang across the capital as the ceremony began, including those of Notre Dame Cathedral. Emergency workers, city staff and volunteers took turns reading the full list of 132 recognized victims. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Thanks to David for that report. Digital ID in the UK is under the spotlight, promoted by Prime Minister Keir Starmer's Labour government as a tool to curb illegal work, but seen by critics as a step toward greater state control.
For analysis, NTD's Daniel Monahan spoke with attorney Jeff Childers, who is author of the blog Coffee and COVID.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced in late September that a mandatory digital ID system will be introduced to prove the right to live and work in the UK. The IDs would be stored on smartphones, similar to a digital bank card, showing a person's name, photo, nationality, date of birth, and residency status. An online petition opposing the move has already garnered nearly 3 million signatures. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has dismissed the proposal as government overreach.
All that digital ID will be is a means of controlling the population, of telling us what we can and can't do, of fining the innocent.
Activist Montgomery Toms has voiced similar concerns.
Control us, track us, surveil us, bring forward a cashless society, a social credit system like they have in China.
According to an April report in the Times of London, police in England and Wales were making more than 30 arrests a day over so-called offensive posts on social media and other platforms, about 12,000 arrests a year. Attorney Jeff Childers brings up the case of Canadian truckers who were protesting mandatory COVID vaccinations in 2022. The Canadian government froze their bank accounts.
So if they've got your data and they've got a connection, they got your location at any time because it's on your smartphone, it's all wired in, and then you post something online they don't like, could they just switch your bank account off? I don't think we have to get too conspiratorial to conclude that the British government wants a lot more control over their population.
Childers warns about weaponization, bringing up the FBI in 2023 labeling traditional Catholics as racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists, which enabled placing federal law enforcement agents into places of worship.
And so what happens is, without transparency and oversight, these government agencies always tend toward punishing their opponents politically and supporting their political allies. That is what always happens. And so with digital IDs, you're just talking about making that process even faster and more convenient.
Keir Starmer bills digital ID as a way to combat illegal immigration.
You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID.
But the problem is they don't follow the law anyway. So they're not going to get the app that proves they're not a citizen and then get turned down for a job. I mean, it just doesn't make any rational sense.
This isn't the British government's first try at a digital ID. A biometric ID was introduced in 2006, also described back then as a way to combat illegal immigration.
And so people were like, no, they're going to use it for other stuff. It's going to creep. It's going to spread. They're going to add more things to it as soon as it gets to be put into law. And what do you suppose happened as soon as they got that law passed? They started tacking on more things that they were using the digital ID for. And so within a couple years, that 2006 proposal just fell apart and they repealed it.
Starmer has pushed back on concerns over surveillance, saying the idea of having ID on your phone is not that far removed from having bank accounts or other apps on your phone. Privacy groups including Privacy International and Big Brother Watch have highlighted the risks of digital identity systems, including data breaches, user profiling, exclusion, surveillance, and function creep. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Thank you, Daniel. And NTD reached out to Prime Minister Starmer's office regarding concerns about digital ID, but we have not heard back yet.
And up ahead, a major mob-tied sports betting bust in New Jersey. Prosecutors charged 14 people and say the ring moved millions through offshore sites. Stay with us. We'll have that and more right after the break.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. A pivotal step in the ongoing space race as Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket lifts 2 NASA spacecraft toward Mars.
Yeah, really interesting development. The rocket lifted off from Florida yesterday.
The launch followed several days of delays caused by bad weather and strong solar activity, the latter of which was responsible for recent rare aurora sightings far out of their normal range.
And in a major milestone, Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin successfully landed the reusable booster on an ocean platform. The company's first attempt in January had failed.
NASA's twin Escapade orbiters will first spend a year in a holding orbit near Earth before heading to Mars once the 2 planets align. There will be a study on how solar wind and magnetic forces erode the planet's atmosphere, clues on how Mars went from warm and wet to cold and dry. Scientists will also learn how best to protect astronauts against Mars's harsh radiation environment.
The spacecraft are set to reach Mars in 2027, and in a social media post, SpaceX CEO Elon Musk congratulated his competitor Jeff Bezos and the entire Blue Origin team.
Meanwhile, Shohei Ohtani was unanimously named the winner of the National League MVP award. It marks his 3rd straight MVP award and 4th overall.
This makes him only the 2nd player in Major League Baseball history with at least 4 MVPs. He's behind Barry Bonds, who has 7.
The Dodgers superstar previously won 2 American League MVPs with the Los Angeles Angels before joining the Dodgers.
After the switch, he won the National League MVP award in 2024, and he helped the Dodgers win the World Series in both of his seasons with the team.
A highlight this year was a historic game against the Milwaukee Brewers in October, where he hit 3 home runs and struck out 10 batters in 6 innings.
Wow, what a contributor, huh? What a stud.
Indeed. And as dazzling aurora lights illuminated skies across the U.S. this week, stargazers in parts of Australia and Europe also enjoyed the spectacle.
Yeah, the lights were sparked by a powerful geomagnetic storm.
In southeastern Australia, the Bureau of Meteorology issued an aurora alert as vibrant pink and green lights danced over the state of Victoria.
Hyperlapse footage showed multicolored waves of aurora, Australia, or southern lights, streaking across the night sky.
In the northern hemisphere, Italy's Aosta Valley caught a glimpse of the aurora borealis, which turned the sky above
Matterhorn, I believe, yeah.
It was turned a brilliant red.
Yeah, that's, I believe, the largest peak in Europe, in the Alps. And while the geomagnetic storms like this one can produce spectacular celestial displays, scientists say they can also disrupt the satellites and radio signals. So you pay a price for all that beauty, right?
It's quite beautiful. But over in London, the Kew Gardens there is getting ready to sparkle for the holiday season.
It's time, right? It's time to get into the holiday spirit. And an enchanting nighttime trail will bring the gardens to life with color, sound, shimmering displays. Here's a closer look at that.
The display includes a light show on Temperate House, various light installations, a dance floor, and an orchestra made of lights illuminating the after-dark landscape of the gardens.
This year we've got 8 world-exclusive installations as part of the event. That includes bespoke things like the Palm House show behind me. We've put a bridge over the Palm House pond. We have an orchestra made of lights. We've got blooms blowing in the air. mycelium networks reaching out from under tree trunks. I think one of the things I like about Christmas at Kew is that it has very gentle moments, like the one behind me, which is very contemplative, but there's also really fun and jazzy bits. So we've got a dance floor. We're encouraging people to dance along with giant headphones. But I think if I had to pick a favorite, the mycelium network is really beautiful. It kind of explores the network underground between mushrooms. It just feels so fitting at Kew, so the home of the fungarium.
Now in its 13th year, Christmas at Kew began as an initiative to attract guests at a traditionally quiet time for the gardens.
And what was once the quietest time of year at Kew is now one of the busiest. We have more than 300,000 people that are going to be coming over the next 49 nights to see this amazing show.
Christmas at Kew opens to the public today and runs until Sunday, January 4th, 2026.
Shenyun Performing Arts has dazzled audiences worldwide with the extraordinary skill and grace of its classical Chinese dancers.
And now, for a limited time, viewers have a rare chance to see what makes their performances so breathtaking in a special Mid-Autumn Festival Technique Showcase that's premiering November 15th on the video platform Ganjing World. Here's an early look at that.
Watch the exclusive premiere on November 15th at 8 p.m. Eastern on Ganjing World.
What a technique. So cool. All right, we're going to head to a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. You can have it all. In the search for a successful, fulfilling, and well-rounded life, what does that really look like? Many women today, particularly, find themselves caught trying to balance work and family life, and it can be a lot. It can make you feel lost and even burned out.
That's right. Joining us today with insights and findings and perhaps redefining that balance is Chelsea Ann, a board-certified nurse practitioner, women's health and integrative medicine practitioner, and the author of the new book, The Feminine Effect, Discovering Your True Nature. Welcome. It's so great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to speak about this today.
For sure. And just to begin with, what do you think is the core of the issue for women today?
Well, I really want to talk about redefining what success is and redefining what power is. And I want to take it back to my own story. So, because everyone has a different definition of what success is. And as we know, society standards, it's financial, it's gaining, it's competition, it's often greed. And so we lose ourselves as women. So personally, in my life, I was incredibly ambitious, competitive. I wanted to get to the top, and it felt like there was a carrot always dangling. Like you never get enough. You get to that point, and then there's always more. There's more courses, there's more education, there's more travel, there's more homes, and it never ended. And in my personal life, it ended in a divorce. For my patients, what I see is they often become physically ill. Maybe it's their thyroid, maybe it's their adrenal glands, perhaps it's anxiety, maybe it's a discord within their relationship, or they're just not feeling happy within their marriage. And so this book, The Feminine Effect, takes women through a transformational process of why are we uncomfortable? What are we missing? And the answer is we're missing our nature as women. We're missing our connection to our femininity. We don't know what it is anymore because we're guided by society's standards of what that is, which is independence and financial success.
So then, how would you then redefine what success should look like?
Well, you kind of have to take a step back and undo everything you think is right and stop looking to the outside world of what that is. So first, you have to begin the process by getting to know yourself. Number one. So getting to know yourself is not so easy for most people because you're looking outside for a definition of who you are. So that may be therapy, which is easy. Maybe meditation. It may be taking relationships where you look as a relationship as a mirror. Is it in disharmony or is it in harmony? And then the next step would be defining what you need in your life to make your feminine nature possible. So maybe that's taking a space from work, taking a break, and then, you know, figuring out, like, do I want more connection? Do I want more, what are my values? How can I bring in feminine values into my life? Is it connection? Is it love? Is it integrity? Is it worthiness? Is it relationships? We've lost those things, which are incredibly power to the woman, and intuition. And then the third would be try not to go for things you can't attain. So I think a lot of people are always in a moment of unhappiness because they can't attain the things they want. And so they're always on the rat race.
And so you mentioned that your personal story has really informed your approach today, and you've been through, I know, a spiritual, you've mentioned a spiritual kind of journey, as well as these healing modalities and that you've practiced along the way. How do you kind of fuse those, and how does your personal story influence your approach?
It's everything. So, like, I think that people want to touch into spirituality and they want to know what that is, and they do it through the mind. And there was many years I did it through the mind. So like most women who are beginning the process of trying to find themselves, they go to meditation class, they go to yoga class, they travel the world, they go, you know, they take courses. And a lot of that is a business. And really a lot of it is opening your heart. And when you open your heart and you begin to feel as a woman, your intuition is connected. And then you can maybe put your values will change. And so if you're always working, you may say, today's not the day. I'm going to be with my children today. Maybe you don't have the separation of a nanny anymore. It's like simple things when the heart opens. So the spiritual process becomes, you know, very practical.
So like just in a moment to moment or day by day approach, how would you advise people to start opening their hearts?
Well, you have to see the conditioning from your childhood that closed your heart. So there's typically events in women's lives and in men's lives that program us or condition us to act in a certain way. And then on top of that, we have our conditioning from society that tells us, you know, just what we're talking about. Financial success is what you need to do, or I need to act a certain way. I'm going to look on social media and that's how I'm going to be. So in order to get to know yourself in your authenticity, you often have to take space. Maybe you have to take a break from work, you know, for a period of time to heal. Like you would heal from a chronic illness. You know, you have to know that, you know, something's out of balance. I want to reconnect to the femininity and gain my power back. And then maybe take a break from social media, simple things like that to reconnect to your children and your family.
And it can feel like such a sacrifice, almost like you say, if we're getting our sense of power from our income or from our identity at work, to take that break. But here you've described femininity as a source of power. If you could speak more to that about what you see femininity as.
So this one like makes me want to cry, because why do all women, and I'm going to say the word masculine, not to separate, but I'm speaking to women as a woman. Why do we think it's more powerful to act like a man? Why is the definition oftentimes, and I'm not saying that we don't want these certain powers in society. What I'm saying is we often look to success and power as defined by society, which has been defined by something bigger than us. And so what I'm saying here is what if intuition became a source of power? What if motherhood was then in the Western world? I work with mothers. I've worked with mothers in labor and delivery in the clinic every single day for 15 years. I hear countless times that mothers never feel enough. They never feel like they're doing enough. They always feel non-creative and they feel depressed. And I think it's a society, they're looking to society rather than saying, I'm doing the most amazing thing in the whole world. So maybe I'm talking to 5% of women right now. And maybe those 5% of women hear me and they say, I can be a stay-at-home mom and I'm powerful for that. And then maybe 10% say, I'm going to take more time with my children. And then maybe 25% say, you know, I'm going to go part-time because I'm going to balance my life more, and so that I'm not going to be physically, emotionally, spiritually ill.
All leading to a greater sense of well-being, more balance, and that important aspect of raising the next generation of human beings for human civilization, right?
Yeah, like why have we lost the importance of that? Why, It's so important.
Yeah, such an important topic. Chelsea Ann, the author of The Feminine Effect. Such an important topic. Thank you for coming in and sharing with us today.
Thank you guys for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
And we do have to end our show now. Thank you for joining us. Stay with us, though, for NTD News Today at 10 with Alice Tong coming up shortly. I'm Carrie Dunst.
I'm Stephanie Cox. See you soon.